Alrighty, what's up everybody? We're back again with another YouTube video. Today will be the critically acclaimed Balanced Druid class guide video, where basically we're going to be going through talking about the rotation, talking about talents, talking about like stats and what other things that balance ends up needing just at a base class level. There is going to be a two-part series of this. Basically, this is going to be the first part, which is the base class, and the second part will be legendaries, covenants, conduits, and soulbinds. So the more intricate, more volatile stuff that is more likely to change given tuning, where this is going to be more towards just like the base class and like how to play it at a normal level. Yeah. So with that said, as always, my Wowhead guide will be more up to date than any video will be, and the reason for that is because making videos, it's impossible for me to be able to edit them after the fact. So if you have any questions, you can definitely reference the Wowhead guide. Alternatively, you can shoot me a message on Discord or ask me whenever I'm streaming. Stuff like that will always be an easier way for me to get an answer out to you. Yeah, so basically that is that. And with that said, make sure you check out my stream if you have any questions. Twitch.tv/titles. It's very important. Thank you. I really appreciate it. So starting out with just an overview of the spec, just kind of what balance is. Balance is a basic builder spender with astral power as our primary resource. It's very similar to BFA and Legion variants of Moonkin, if you're at all familiar with those, where Wrath and Starfire are your builders, Star Surge and Starfall are your spenders, and then you have dots, which are just high damage per time that you end up casting, which are Moonfire and Sunfire. So if you've ever played Moonkin, this should not come as any surprise to you. Your major damage cooldown is Celestial Alignment, which gives you both sides of your Eclipse. Eclipse is the system that is probably the most you would be the most unfamiliar with if you've never played Moonkin before. Basically, Eclipse is an empowerment buff to your damage, and you also get part of your mastery with it, where you end up casting two abilities and you get the alternative side of the Eclipse. Buffs Wrath and Starfire by reducing cast time and increasing the damage that they end up doing. So your mastery while in Solar Eclipse buffs your nature damage by a % amount, whereas your mastery while in Lunar Eclipse buffs your arcane damage by a % amount. Some abilities are both spell schools, which means they're astral, which whenever you look at some of your abilities like Star Surge, Starfall, Shooting Stars, Fury of Elune, Stellar Flare, and New Moon, those are all astral damage abilities. They're both spell schools. So meaning that whenever you press Celestial Alignment and you get both sides of your Eclipse, you are able to double dip and get % damage from both sides. So yeah, that's basically just the base overview of the spec, not anything too intricate, just a basic builder spender. Nothing that is out of the ordinary, I would say. So that was the overview. Next, let's talk about talents. So starting off with the first row, you have Force of Nature, Warrior of Elune, and Nature's Balance. Nature's Balance is going to be the general go-to just for damage on AoE and single target. The reason is because it has the highest astral power per minute, and like it is going to be probably your most used talent on this row. It also has a nice utility of realigning your astral power to 50 once you're out of combat for extended periods of time, which is pretty nice for Mythic Plus. Warrior of Elune is currently undertuned, but could be good for specific burst situations. I wouldn't hedge my bets on that, but it can be good in certain situations, but it historically has been undertuned as a whole. Force of Nature is a Mythic Plus only talent. It's really niche. Trees have the unique ability to be able to taunt mobs off your tank, which is, I don't know, I think that utility is unique enough to where it is situationally very strong. If you're pushing high levels of Mythic Plus, I would suspect to say that Force of Nature may be your go-to talent for the tier 15 row. So next we have the row of Tiger Dash, Renewal, and Wild Charge. Wild Charge is the best in slot for basically every situation on this row, and I don't think you really should feel the need to play anything else for most situations. Renewal is okay if a fight is 0 movement, and then Tiger Dash is just like almost uniformly bad. Like Tiger Dash, I think I've used in all of BFA, I used it on one singular fight, and that was Carapace and N'Zoth. I think anywhere else, Tiger Dash is just way worse than Wild Charge. Up next, we have the affinities, where you have Feral, Restoration, and Guardian affinity. Feral is for damage, so you would assume it's the best choice. However, you're incredibly wrong. The other two choices are substantially better, so don't really ever play Feral. The affinities have new secondary abilities that come with them in this expansion, where Feral has Maim, Resto has Ursul's Vortex, and Guardian has Incapacitating Roar that come with it. Resto is going to be your general go-to. The passive healing from Ysera's Gift is normally better than the passive damage reduction from Thick Hide. So that would be normally the situation where Resto is just favored. On top of that, Ursul's Vortex is normally more useful than Incapacitating Roar. However, Incapacitating Roar can be decent in some spots. Ursul's Vortex is also able to be used while you're in Moonkin form, or Incap Roar shifts you into Bear form. Next, we have the row of Bash, Mass Entangle, and Heart of the Wild. Also important to note that Typhoon as an ability got moved baseline for balance specifically, which is really, really nice for us. So with Heart of the Wild, it has returned after a hiatus. It ends up buffing your affinity for 45 seconds on a 5-minute CD. I think it's a decent raid option, like Bear plus Heart of the Wild or Resto plus Heart of the Wild, and be able to use those as major cooldowns. It can be situationally okay. I think that this is probably the raid option because there's nothing that's really important for raid on this row. Mass Entangle obviously is situationally decent per usual. There's nothing really great about the choice. However, if you need 100% uptime on mass roots, Mass Entangle is normally like okay in some situations in raid. Mighty Bash is the Mythic Plus choice. I feel like the single target stun is normally pretty solid, especially with like the removal of like Outlaw Rogue is no longer has a rotational stun, so not everything's going to be permanently on stun DR. So Mighty Bash is probably going to be your Mythic Plus choice. So for the next row, we have Soul the Forest, Starlord, and Incarnation. Soul the Forest has had like a slight rework where it ends up buffing your active Eclipse. Solar Eclipse makes Wrath generate 50% more astral power, while Lunar Eclipse makes Starfire do 100% more AoE damage. This is going to be your general AoE option, also your Mythic Plus option. Starlord is the exact same. Star Surge and Starfall grant you a stack of 4% haste for 15 seconds, where gaining a stack does not refresh the duration. This is going to be your single target, i.e. raid option. In general, there will be some fluctuation. I think that there will be times where you'll play Soul of the Forest in raid, but I don't think you'll ever play Starlord in Mythic Plus kind of thing. Incarnation is basically you get Celestial Alignment plus 10-second duration on it, and then you get 10% crit strike chance, and you look dope, but it's really bad for damage right now. I don't think that it's good at anything currently. So Soul of the Forest and Starlord are tuned to be your only two options on this row, realistically. Coming up, we have the row of Stellar Drift, Twin Moons, and Stellar Flare, where I think this one's pretty straightforward. Stellar Drift is a Starfall, has a 2-second increased duration, where you end up increasing your damage with Starfall by 15%, and it allows you to cast while moving. This is your go-to AoE talent, by far. Twin Moons is the double Moonfire, the exact same as it always has been, and it's worse than Stellar Drift on any AoE situation, so you don't really have to worry about these two terribly much. Stellar Flare is an extra dot that you end up having to cast, and you end up getting some astral power for it. It is your go-to for single target. For the final talent row, it's Solstice, Fury of Elune, and New Moon. For Solstice, for the uninitiated, is basically for the first 6 seconds of every eclipse, your Shooting Stars procs 300% more often. Shooting Stars, for those who also don't know, is whenever you have a target dotted, you have a chance to call down a Shooting Star that generates 3 astral power. So Solstice basically buffs that up every single time you enter Eclipse. This also includes whenever you enter Celestial Alignment or Primordial Arcanic Pulsar, which is a legendary that we have access to. Fury of Elune is a beam of damage that does a condensed amount over 8 seconds. It has the splash damage formula now moving into Shadowlands, meaning that you don't do damage at a 1-to-1 ratio on every target added. You don't do like an extra damage to it, but there's a slight diminished amount. I think this is like only realistically useful for burst AoE situations, or maybe even burst single target situations that are on a minute CD, but not realistically very strong. New Moon is like really, really bad too. You end up casting moons at a target, but it's underwhelming at best. So Solstice is your end-all be-all best damage option, very similar to Nature's Balance. There's like no situation that New Moon or Fury of Elune really excel at to the point where you would untalent Solstice. So with all the talents said, I think I'll throw up a talent chart of what a standard Mythic Plus talent tree would end up looking like, and a standard raid talent tree will end up looking like for the first patch. Of course, this is all subject to change due to tuning, so take it lightly, but this is going to be generally what you should be running in both raid and Mythic Plus. All right, so for rotation, I don't think there's any strict rotation, but there is like a general priority list of things you should follow. There's no like hard cast sequence macro that you end up having to follow or anything like that. So for your opener, I don't think it really matters, but I'll explain it anyways, just to allow people to get a little bit better understanding. Basically, you want to double Wrath pre-pull to enter your Lunar Eclipse state. If you end up messing it up, it doesn't really matter too much. Just cast another Wrath, another couple Wraths to be able to get into your Lunar Eclipse. Then you end up Star Surging, apply your dots, and then build up to 90 Astral Power with Lunar Strike, press Celestial Alignment, and then just follow the general rotation priority list. So for single target rotation, basically the most important thing is do not cap Astral Power. Making sure that you use your spenders on single target and on AoE is always going to be the most important thing. So use Star Surge and Starfall fairly liberally. Maintain 100% uptime on your dots is the second most important thing. Make sure that you refresh your Moonfire and your Sunfire inside of your Pandemic window. Basically, that means that whenever your dots are sub 30%, then you should refresh them. Refreshing them early is a slight damage loss, but not the biggest deal. The next thing is entering Eclipse ASAP. Making sure that you're always in Eclipse and getting the bonus damage from your mastery is incredibly important. So lingering outside of Eclipse is just going to cost you a decent amount of damage. Don't lose cooldown uses. I think this is pretty self-explanatory. It most notably, if you end up losing like a full Celestial Alignment use on a boss or in a dungeon, you're going to be losing a considerable amount of damage. So make sure that you're pressing your Celestial Alignment on CD if you don't know what you're doing. And then the last thing is always be casting. I think that this is also pretty self-explanatory, but the easiest way to gain more damage, just as a general rule for Moonkin, is to be casting more to generate more Astral Power. It allows you to have more spenders, that kind of stuff. Always be casting. Another thing with the rotation is basically you're trying to enter Eclipse as soon as possible with 90 Astral Power banked up, and then you try to triple Star Surge to buff up your Eclipse bonus damage if possible. If it's not possible, then it really doesn't matter that much. Balance has a lot of minor optimizations that can be made in regards to when you're Star Surging or redotting, but nothing outside of like not entering Eclipse quickly, capping on your Astral Power, not casting enough. None of those things will really make your damage go up or down in any considerable or meaningful way. So making sure that you're casting more abilities often is fundamentally the way that you make your damage go up the most whenever you're playing Balanced Druid. There is very few optimizations in your rotation. It is just a general priority list like I explained. Also, on top of that, do not cancel Aura Starlord. I hate getting asked this question. Please stop asking me. Cancel Aura Starlord is dead, thank God, right now. So for multi-target, there's nothing really rotationally that's super important on multi-target. Our multi-target will start at 2 targets generally, 3 targets if you're talented and know both Starlord and Stellar Flare. So the first and most important thing is maintaining a Starfall with 100% uptime. Also, write this down, Starfall does not stack, so you can't just like mash Starfall over and over again as your only AoE spender. Unfortunately, Starfall does not stack, so that means that you want to bank up extra Astral Power that you have lying around. But the next thing is don't cap Astral Power. Spend it on Star Surge whenever you have bonus AP, but make sure that you have enough to have 1 Starfall out at all times. Make sure that you do not overspend on Star Surge on AoE. It's easy to kind of overspend on Star Surge on AoE if you're not careful. So bank it up, use and have 1 Starfall out at all times, and then like spend any excess on Star Surge. The next question you have to ask yourself is, do the mobs live long enough to dot? Which this is pull specific. I think you always Sunfire mobs, especially on AoE. It may not always be worth to Moonfire, though, especially without Twin Moons. Moonfire is used most of the time inside of Solar Eclipse, but on AoE, you're going to start out in Lunar Eclipse at the very beginning. So you're going to be wrathing twice to be able to enter Lunar Eclipse, meaning that you're going to Moonfire and it's going to be delayed by 20 seconds on pull because you don't want to Moonfire while in your Lunar Eclipse because you'd rather be casting Starfire whenever you're talented in the Soul of the Forest. More often than not, it may not be worth Moonfiring on targets depending on how long the pack lasts. Theoretically, it's worth Moonfiring the whole entire pack prior to pressing Celestial Alignment, but personally, I have not noticed any damage difference between just Sunfiring the entire pack, getting 1 to 2 mobs with Moonfire on them due to the diminishing returns on shooting stars, and then just slamming Celestial Alignment. So I just kind of play it by ear with how the pull is going to function, but Moonfiring is worth significantly less in this expansion. So after you ask yourself, do the mobs live long enough to dot, the next thing you have to do is making sure that you alternate Eclipse states ASAP. I think that actually the dotting and entering Eclipse states, like you should absolutely be doing that as soon as possible and making sure that you are entering Eclipse states literally on cooldown is incredibly important because Even regardless of Eclipse state, your Starfall is going to be getting buffed by your Mastery bonus during both Eclipse states, so you always want to be in at least one if possible. And then basically you end up filling your extra globals with your corresponding Eclipse builder. Infrequently is it worth to cast Starfire and Solar Eclipse? I think I get asked this question a decent amount. It depends on your mastery, but in general, it's like 8+ targets. Is it worth to cast Starfire and Solar Eclipse? So more often than not, the answer is no. You should just continue to cast your Eclipse builder. So that really is the rotation for Moonkin. It's not like overly complicated or anything. And like I said, it's a general priority list. There's no like hard cast sequence macro. So I think the best thing that you can do is just like start playing around with it and try to learn what works for you, and just start to try to get the hang of it. And it's a lot of decision making that goes into playing Moonkin, but realistically, it's not that complicated, I don't think, rotationally. All right, so the last thing we're going to go over are stats. Stats is a pretty short section, so we're just going to go over it quickly. Intellect is your top stat. They've rebalanced stats to where Intellect is going to probably be your best, maybe throughout the whole entire expansion. Stay tuned for that. Maybe they'll add some convoluted secondary systems to where Intellect is no longer our best stat anymore. Mastery is right below Intellect as our top secondary stat. Mastery is poggers, as the kids would say, and at the same time, stat DR is a thing, so you don't want only Mastery, but Mastery is still your best stat. Everything else is like a secondary effect. I think that there are no haste break points. Actually, I know that there are no haste break points. So the best thing that you can do, and the best advice that I could give you as a player, is to use top gear on raid bots to be able to sim your gear itself, and that will come out with what is the best stat weight for you personally, and what the best gear choices that you have for yourself are. And so, yeah, that's basically it. Part 2 will come out soon. Part 2, of course, will end up including legendaries, covenants, conduits, and soulbinds. So, yeah, check out my Twitch stream. If you enjoyed the video, comment, like, subscribe, all that stuff. Check out my Twitter, join my Discord, all the stuff down in the description. I will also leave a link to the document that I used to record this video in case you want to look at it. Again, it may be out of date, so I would highly recommend checking out the Wowhead class guide if you're looking for other stuff. Icy Veins is also written by Bora, so it's reputable and up to date as well. At least it should be. So, yeah, that will be it, and I will see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.